You want to support Roland Martin Unfiltered? Be sure to join our Bring the Funk fan club. Every dollar that you give to us supports our daily digital show. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real as Roland Martin Unfiltered. By going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com, you can make this possible. All right, folks, Joe Biden stirred up a hornet's nest when he recently had a fundraiser in New York where he talked about working with segregationists. Folks like James Eastland of Mississippi and Herman Talmadge of Georgia. He said he was making the point to argue that Washington functioned more smoothly and that even though he disagreed with them on a lot of issues, they still got things done. This was the quote he gave. I was in a caucus with James O. Eastland. He never called me boy. He always called me son. A guy like Herman Talmadge, one of the meanest guys I ever knew. You go down the list of all these guys. Well, guess what? At least there was some civility. We got things done. We didn't agree on much of anything. We got things done. We got it finished. But today, you look at the other side and you're the enemy. Not the opposition, the enemy. We don't talk to each other anymore. Well, that did not sit well with lots of Democrats, including many of the folks who are running against Joe Biden for the Democratic nomination in 2020. Senator Cory Booker of New Jersey was not happy at all. He said in a statement, quote, you don't joke about calling black men boys. Men like James O. Eastland use words like that and the racist policies that accompany them to perpetuate white supremacy and strip black Americans of our very humanity. Vice President Biden's relationships with proud segregationists are not the model for how we make America a safer and more inclusive place for black people and for everyone. I have to tell Vice President Biden, as someone I respect, that he is wrong for using his relationships with Eastland and Talmadge as examples of how to bring our country together. Now, Biden did not back down. This was his retort to what Booker had to say.
Are you going to apologize like Cory Booker has called for?
For what?
Cory Booker's called for it.
Cory should apologize. He knows better. There's not a racist bone in my body. I've been involved in civil rights my whole career. Period. Period. Period.
This is with Greg Carr, Chair at Department of Afro-American Studies, Howard University. Robert Patillo joining us via Skype. He's a civil rights attorney. And Johanna LeBlanc, National Security and Foreign Affairs Analyst. So, Greg, I'm going to start with you. I read the comments from Biden, and I get the point he was making. I would argue, which I tweeted, I said, my suggestion, find some other Republicans who you've worked with if you want to make that point, because when you talk about these segregationists, you talk about what they did, their entire intent was to disenfranchise black people.
Absolutely, absolutely. You know, young Joe Biden ran into Talmadge and Eastland near the end of their careers in the Senate. And I'm sure Vice President Biden should probably go back and reread Robert Cairo's trilogy on Lyndon Johnson, the master of the Senate. Johnson knew how to twist the arms of those segregationists, but Biden was up and coming. He was trying to make his way in a Senate that was really controlled in many ways by those Dixiecrats.
Johnson was a Southerner.
That's exactly right.
Biden was a Northerner.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Pennsylvania, working class Joe, as he said. And one of the things they could bond on was their whiteness. Now, you know, this is not even 10 years, just a little over, actually 11 years, after these cats signed on to this Southern Manifesto. They were staunch racists. But, you know, for me, I think this is probably Biden casting about for a sister soldier moment. In other words, he's trying to signal to these white folks in this quote-unquote base that they're always trying to capture that they can never get, I'm okay. I know how to work that side. Now, I think he stepped over the line when he tried to say something to Cory Booker, and that puts somebody like Simone Sanders in an impossible situation. You know, Simone is probably gonna have to massage that retort she made. But the last thing I'll say is I think you really raised it, Roland, when you evoked Fannie Lou Hamer on social media. When you hear Fannie Lou Hamer talk about James Eastland at that testimony she gave in 1964 at the Democratic National Convention, that means that Joe Biden should have had the courage in the late 60s. He can't say this is a different age. No, Fannie Lou Hamer stood up to him in the 60s. Why didn't you, young man?
Right. And the reality, Johanna, is what you're dealing with here is Joe Biden also has to deal with the issue of busing in the early 70s. And his comments that he made as well. And what he also has to understand that This is not, first of all, being President Obama's vice president for 8 years ain't kryptonite. You have a generation of black folks who held comments Hillary Clinton made in 92 against her, super predator. He needs to understand that you piss off 18 to 29-year-old black folks, look what happened to Hillary. They may not turn out for you.
Aside from the comment that Vice President Biden made today, I think that it's very troubling that Vice President Biden is not acknowledging racial issues in America and how the effects of that has really, like the racial issues have really impacted the way we live, the way we see the world, and our ability to access various institutions. Like, I want a potential president who's going to acknowledge the wrongs of the past and provide me with perhaps proposals on how we're going to make the future right. Right? There are a lot of issues in terms of segregation, in terms of various laws in America that have, systematically oppressed people of color. I want a candidate who's going to speak on those things, right? Because especially right now, we're living in a time when we're at the crossing line, right? We have a president that we see time and time again have expressed that issues impacting people of color are not a priority, right? So I want Biden to be more on course in terms of providing us with possible solutions. This is not the first alarming comment that he has made. It seems to be a trend, and I'm not sure who his advisors are, but he needs to be a bit more well-advised when it comes to issues impacting
Here's
people
the deal,
of color.
though. You can't advise someone like Biden. Robert, the reality is he is who he is. But here's what Ron Brownstein tweeted out earlier, Robert. He says, re-upping, the Joe Biden campaign, here we go to my iPad. The Joe Biden campaign is testing whether today's Dems can accept the choices earlier party leaders made when Southern conservatives were vital to their House, Senate majorities and non-college whites. Many conservatives on culture/race equal 70% of all voters. Now, let me, and there was a quote he used in here, and I'm going to pull it up as well, where he said, quote, Dems first of all, he said, Joe Biden will now force Democrats to decide whether those earlier views are still acceptable in a party that has moved left since then on all racially related issues in response to both the shifting attitudes in the country and the increasing diversity of its voters. He also said Dems in almost every state, and certainly in presidential elections, relied on an electoral coalition centered primarily on whites without college degrees and secondarily on African Americans. In 1980, 60% of Carter's votes in his losing race versus Reagan came from working class whites. All we've heard in the past 2.5 years, 3 years of Donald Trump, Robert, is that you had those white voters who went for Donald Trump. You had, and I said this, 60 days out, I could pull the video up on MSNBC. I said, what you cannot count are white folks who've never voted before coming out of the woodworks and voting. Like it or not, and you have to deal with this, a Joe Biden is saying to white voters,
that's right,
I'm a better option than Trump. So now the calculus, Robert, people now have to make the determination. And first of all, I'm not handing the nomination to Joe Biden. But don't folks have to make a determination, do I roll with this or do I accept Trump 2.0?
Well, pardon me for disagreeing with everybody on the panel as I usually do. But I think there are 1,050 things to disagree and to criticize Joe Biden on. I don't think this is one of them. If you look at what he is saying, he is making the very particular point that the Tea Party Republicans now, that the Mitch McConnell Republicans now are harder to work with than Dixiecrats in the 1970s. That the people we have in office right now who blocked President Obama for 8 years are more recalcitrant in their political acumen than people like Talmadge, like people like Eastland, like people like Strom Thurmond were, who are at least willing to negotiate, who are at least willing to sit down and come to a good faith agreement. So if that's the litmus test that we're going to have for a Democratic candidate, whether or not they are completely pure on all subject matter, then it could be very difficult to build a coalition that wins outside of the traditional blue states.
No, Robert. If Biden had said just what you said, we wouldn't be here. See, that's the difference.
That's right.
Had Joe Biden said, let me tell y'all something. When I was a young man who came to the United States Senate, we had some of the most virulent racists from southern states. I had to work with folks like Jim Eastland of Mississippi, folks like Herman Talmadge of Georgia, folks who blocked every advancement for African Americans, you name it. And you know what? If I had to compare them to today's Republican Party, it was easier to work with them than to work with today's Republicans. That's not, and see, that's the difference, Robert. It's not necessarily what you say, it's also how you say it.
Oh, absolutely. And I think Joe Biden does need to hire better communications people around him. He has that same issue that Trump had, where he just spouts off at the mouth as a 70-year-old white man and doesn't understand that the context is different now than it was in the 1970s or the 1980s when he was a younger person. So yes, he needs better communication people around him to tighten it up. Remember, he was always known as being a gaffe machine. But what I do not want Democrats to do is take this a bridge too far. Create a litmus test like they did for Al Franken, where you have to be completely pure in all ways, or else you cannot be the nominee. Because otherwise, you're going to have a candidate who can win California, New York, Illinois, and maybe one other state, and then the rest of the map is going to be red, and we're going to have 4 more years of Trump, and then 8 years of Pence, and then 8 more years of Ivanka after that. We have to learn that you cannot go for purity if you want to win. Obama wasn't pure when it comes to the liberal litmus test that exists now. We will never have that candidate if we want to actually win and regain national power.
Greg, I agree 100%. But again, though, what Biden has to understand is that he also has history. Here we go to my iPad. The book, Big Jim Eastland, the godfather of Mississippi.
Yes.
In this book, the author, J. Lee Annis Jr., writes about Eastland mentoring young United States senators like Joe Biden. Talks about how Biden wrote letters to them thanking them for their work on the anti-busing bill. And so that's a part of this. But again, had he articulated the way Robert did, we're not here. But when he doesn't, he said we didn't agree on a lot. No. That's not how you frame two of the most violent, racist senators ever.
No, I think Robert, we know that they watch this broadcast. Robert gave Biden his talking point, if he had said it that way. But something has changed between the late 60s and now. As you said, I agree with Johanna. The demographics have shifted. This isn't the same country. Between then and now, you had Bill Clinton, who, as I said, attacked Sister Soldier as a wink and a nod to those quote-unquote working-class whites that were bleeding from the Democratic Party. And since then, and you bring this up all the time, as the demographics have shifted, you got Cory Booker from a generation that said, we're not going to play that. And for me, with the bad messaging notwithstanding, and I agree, that's why I said Simone Sanders, his director of communication, young African-American woman, maybe some of this is generational. If she had heard that, maybe, and nobody can tell him what to do, but at least talk to him that way. But what I was about to say is that you have the chastising of Cory Booker. That's not just tone deaf. That is the character issue.
And that's the piece, Johanna. Again, listening. You, in an issue like this here, you don't tell no black man who also is a United States Senator, he needs to apologize to me. First of all, Booker didn't call him a racist. Booker simply blasted the comments. And that's one of those where if you're Joe Biden, you want to say, what the hell is wrong with Senator Cory Booker? He knows better than me. The way you answer that is, I respectfully disagree with Senator Booker. I'm telling you, Biden needs to understand, he can cloak himself in 8 years of Obama. That ain't gonna save him. No. He cannot make mistakes like this again. Go ahead.
I don't want to be presumptuous, and I don't want to put words in Vice President Biden's mouth, but I think it's a matter of it's a generational thing, in my opinion, because we have. Yes, I'm concerned about some of the comments that he has made. I'm very concerned, but I think that with the right people around him, he will do the right thing. That I'm confident.
No,
about, right?
okay,
we can't
no.
Be so caught up
We also said
nuances.
if Trump get the right folks around him, he's 73. Biden 76. I mean, no. We have to stop with that. You are who you are. A 76-year-old man has to learn to say, hold up, I can't roll the way I used to. No. And to Greg's point about tone, see, here's the deal. I was on a panel at Martha's Vineyard. Charles Ogletree had this panel, and this was 2008. And Obama won the nomination. All these white folks are all up and on, especially these white women who supported Hillary. And we're on the panel, and David Gergen was on the panel with me, and he goes, Obama, you look at the numbers, has no choice but to pick Hillary Clinton as vice president. And I said, well, the hell he don't. And then I said, it's offensive that a black man can't even enjoy getting the nomination when the next day Bob Johnson put a letter out talking about how he needs to pick Hillary Clinton. And so I was sitting here jamming it up. Alan Dershowitz took issue with my tone. I said, who the hell you think you talking to? I said, man, here's my point. What white folks got to understand is that what Biden was really, see, it's a tone thing. And see, it's hard for white people to understand when you are proud. Why did Cornel West and Obama go at it? Because the real deal was Obama cussed them out at the National Urban League.
No question.
It's a tone thing.
Yeah.
Biden has to watch his tone.
Okay.
And if you don't watch your tone, you're going to piss a lot of black folks off, because for a lot of black folks who are 50 and under,
brother,
we ain't accepting certain tones.
Here's my position. Here's my position, Roland. I get it, but we cannot be caught up in these little nuances, right? We need to focus on the big picture.
No.
The big picture
Needs to focus on. See, no. But Johanna, I hear you.
I really
But he has to understand, bruh, you leading in the polls. You have to watch your tone.
Okay.
Because you're going to get checked. Robert, go ahead.
Let's not take the politics out of this. We have to understand Cory Booker is currently trailing Joe Biden by 33 points in the latest polls, 35% to 3%. Right now, Joe Biden in South Carolina has 50% of the black vote, and if Cory Booker can't make a showing in South Carolina, he has no reason to be in the race. So understand the politics around it. Cory Booker isn't just doing this with an empty heart, or he's not doing this for no reason. He is trying to make a case for him to rise in the polls, to make some kind of headway against the other candidates who have left him in the dust. And we can't leave that out of it.
But Johanna, this is the final comment before I go to my next story. The reality on stories like this is you have to look at 2016. You had a generation of black voters who held super predators against Hillary Clinton. They held it against her and never let go. I'm just saying, and they did not vote.
And I understand, as people, we have to look at our priorities, right? Was that the best move? Let's look at in the context of what's happening.
I would say it wasn't,
right?
But they did it anyway.
Right. So as a people, we have to readdress our values. Like, what do we value? Are we going to focus on every little nuance, things that don't really matter? When in fact, I think if you have a person like Biden in office, I think that with the right people around him, he'll do the right thing. I mean, he hired Miss Simone as his PR.
But here's the point.
And I think
here's the final point on this here. And I totally agree with you. I understand practicality. I understand common sense. But the onus is also on the candidate.
Absolutely.
To understand that I better watch my tone.
Exactly.
I better watch how I say it, because now what he's done is he's now had to deal with this for 48 hours. And it's called an unforced error.
And it's a good thing. It's a good thing.
No, actually, it's not a good thing.
It's a good
but
thing.
It's a good thing it's happening in June and not in October.
That's a good
That's
point.
what's a good thing.
It's a good thing to address the issues, like, at the very beginning to let you know that, to call things out as they are.
What I'm saying
because
is,
I think that a lot of times we don't do that. I think it's a good thing. It's a good approach.
Error. You shouldn't have to be dealing with it, and so it was a mistake.
But there's
all
a
I'm saying is,
gap as well,
Vice President Biden is real simple. Use Arlen Specter. Use some other Republicans you work for. Don't use segregation is all I'm saying. All right, folks, back to that Roland Mark Unfiltered video in just one moment. All right, folks, they're back. MarijuanaStock.org is another great investment opportunity. If you were lucky enough to invest in their last crowdfunding campaign, you know they raised a ton of money in just a few months investing in legal marijuana farms. Those initial investors now own shares of a publicly traded company, and they are on fire. Now they have a new investment opportunity that is as good, if not even better, than the last one. I'm talking about industrial hemp CBD. For those who don't know, the hemp plant is the cousin to marijuana with a much higher concentration of CBD, which means hemp CBD gives you all the medical benefits of marijuana without getting you high. Until recently, hemp farming was practically illegal in the U.S. and heavily regulated by the DEA. However, the 2018 Farm Bill changed all of that, making it legal to grow hemp CBD in the U.S. and creating one of the largest commodities worldwide. They need land to grow all the plants. Now, this makes for an incredible investment opportunity, and that's where our good friends at 420 Real Estate come in. Their business model is simple. They buy land that supports hemp CBD grow operations and lease it to licensed, high-paying tenants. That's right, they are hemp CBD landlords, and you can get in on the action. You can invest in the crowdfunding campaign for as little as $200 up to $10,000. Like I said, you don't want to miss out on this. To invest, go to marijuanastock.org. That's marijuanastock.org. And yes, this is a black-owned company, so you want to try it and get in the game. Back to the Roland